Hello, my name's Tim Kenny from Tim Kenny Surveying. I'm a residential surveyor and industry trainer. And in this video today, I want to talk a lot about further investigations, right, as part of a home survey. It's kind of a slightly difficult subject. The truth is that all home surveys fundamentally are going to be limited in some way. They're going to be restricted in some way, fundamentally because we don't take buildings apart when we carry out a home survey. We're working for the buyer of the property, not the seller, so not the owner of the property, so therefore we do not have, generally speaking, consent to carry out any kind of destructive work. So there's always going to be a limit to what we can physically determine about a property, and that will inevitably lead to occasions when additional investigations are required. But of course, we don't want to overuse those. We don't want to just litter our reports with recommendations for further investigations. Sometimes it can feel comforting to do that, in the sense that we'll kind of, flagged up an issue and passed it on to somebody else to deal with. Yeah, okay, but at the end of the day, you're the surveyor, you're the competent professional that your client has instructed and paid to attend that property, so you should be able to kind of at least tell them everything that you can tell them from that non-invasive inspection within the scope of your terms of engagement. We shouldn't just do it to kind of cover ourselves, that kind of, just in case, at least of, I've not seen anything wrong, but I'm going to chuck this further investigation in there just because I can. We never should be doing that. And I think that if you're doing that, then you kind of know you're doing it. Let's be honest. So I'm not really going to kind of talk to that side of it. But what I do want to talk about is how you know whether that recommendation for a further investigation is kind of genuine or justified, or whether it is literally just because, you don't really know enough. And the one kind of tool I use for that, and the one I kind of teach and recommend is, okay, well, look, if you're going to recommend a further investigation, you should know every step along that investigative process. Okay, fundamentally, you may not know it in exact detail, but you should be able to outline what that further investigation process is. Okay, you should be able to outline the stages in broad details that the person you're kind of passing it on to will take. You should also be able to tell what the range of potential defects are. Okay, so if you're going to recommend that somebody investigate something further, you should be able to give at least a broad outline of the potential things that they may find. Okay, you should be saying, well, what are they looking for? Okay, well, they're going to look for these things, and they'll either be confirming that or not confirming it. And then of course you should also know what works they may recommend. You should understand, at least to some extent. You may not be able to fully specify the works, you maybe don't have all of the technical details, but again, you should broadly understand what those are going to be. So you should understand what they're going to do, what they could find, and what they could recommend, right? At least in an outline way. If you can't do that, then that kind of implies you as the surveyor perhaps are lacking some knowledge that you need to kind of fill in. Okay, and that's fine. We were all like that. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I still have gaps in my knowledge. I love it when I find them, because at least if I find them, I can fill them. Okay, and again, this is one way I use to fill those gaps. I say, okay, well, do I understand all of those stages? Well, actually, no. You know what? I've got to this point, but I don't know that next bit. Okay, well, I'll go away and I'll find that, and then I'll know that. And next time I come up against something similar, I've got the information there, and what I can provide to my client is going to be even better. It's still within the context of the limitations of my level of inspection. So that's kind of how I use it, my kind of thought process that takes me through the recommendations for investigation. As I said, they're always going to be there, but we as good, competent surveyors should be finding ways to limit that to the best of our ability, and to the sense of the liability involved. What I don't ever want to see anybody ever do is something like, there's a problem with the chimney, get it investigated by a chimney specialist. That is not enough from my point of view. Firstly, what is a chimney specialist? I don't know. Who's a chimney specialist? Actually, you know what? If you're a good surveyor, you should be a chimney specialist. for want of a better word, you should understand all of the things that can go wrong with the chimney. You should understand all of the repairs that may be required to a chimney. You may not have access to the equipment needed to determine the exact causes. Might be access equipment, it might be because it needs a camera to go up the flue, or whatever it may well be. You might have access to that, but you should, if you were given access to that equipment, you should still be able to make the same assessment of the problem and give at least some idea as to the repairs. That is really what we should be expecting from ourselves as surveyors. It's what our clients should be expecting from us. So make sure that's what you're doing. You know what? If you don't understand chimneys, go and find out more. There's plenty of information out there. There's loads of good stuff that you can access. The same as roofs, walls, whatever it might be. I will make an exception, obviously, for electrics and gas. They're going to be beyond us. I'm not going to claim to ever know enough about electrics to provide anything more than broad opinion. But fundamentally, the structure and fabric of a building, that is what we as good surveyors should know. So make sure you have that knowledge. And I say, if you're finding you're making those recommendations, you don't know where those recommendations are going to go, tells you that there's a gap, go and do the CPD and make sure you're filling it. Thank you very much.